Welcome to Time Travelling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Paddy.
And I'm Tricia. This week we join the Doctor and his companions as they face the Macra Terror. We'll be discussing each of the characters and give your thoughts on the story as a whole.
We would also love to hear your thoughts on the story, so in order to join in the discussion, you can check us out at TimeTeamp, that's TIMETEAMP, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. Now though, onto the story recap. Episode 1. In a darkly lit grand hall, a man stealthily makes his way from a side door into the main chamber. He approaches a large TV screen that has a man's face on it, who stares at the newly arrived man impassively till he leaves. The following morning, a marching band is rehearsing a routine with several others looking on. A man only identified as Pilot appears and congratulates the band's leader Barney on another excellent routine. He wishes him luck in the upcoming festival, but their conversation is interrupted by the man who entered the room the night before, but who is now acting more crazed than previously. Pilot addresses him as Medoc and asks him to calm down before he flees from the hallway. The chief of security, Ola, enters with several guards and the pilot orders him to pursue Medoc. They chase him out into the desert outskirts of the colony. While he's avoiding the guards, Medoc sees the TARDIS land nearby and goes to investigate it. Jamie emerges from the TARDIS, brandishing a big stick, and Ben sneaks up behind him to give him a scare. Jamie reprimands him and reminds him of the creature that they saw in the scanner, but the Doctor says that the stick wouldn't do much good because judging by the size of the claw that they saw, the creature it belongs to would be enormous. Polly spots Medoc sneaking up on Jamie and calls out a warning to him. Ben tackles Medoc before he can do anything, and together he and Jamie subdue him. Ola and the guards soon arrive and he thanks them for returning their patient to them. He sends a guard back to the colony to tell Pilot what happened. Jamie asks where they are and the Doctor guesses that they are in the future on a planet similar to Earth. Ola then invites them back to the colony so the Pilot can thank them himself. In Pilot's office, Ola shows the travellers in and Pilot sends him to finish dealing with Medoc. He commends them on their bravery and the Doctor asks about why the colony announcements are made via musical jingles. Pilot says that this is how they operate in the colony in order to keep everyone's spirits up. He then goes to take them for refreshments, but Jamie is wary and tells Polly to be careful. They arrive on a promenade and Barney appears and tells Pilot that the colony controller wishes to thank the travellers personally. A large TV screen is turned on and the face that Medoc saw the night before begins to speak, but its lips do not move. He welcomes them and tells the colony to treat them as honoured guests. Pilot says that he needs to get back to work and leaves Barney in control of the travellers. Barney offers him a wide list of spa and beauty treatments as well as offering the Doctor's clothes to be cleaned, an offer that the Doctor himself is not impressed by. Polly is taken to get her hair done and a reluctant Jamie and eager Ben are taken for massages. The Doctor is taken into a machine that refurbishes his raggedy looking clothes to make them look brand new. Not being too keen on his new appearance, he enters a muscle toning machine which reverses the effects on his clothes, making him happy again. Jamie pleads with Barney to call off the girls attending him and he blushes as Polly compliments him on his new appearance. As Medoc is being led away by Ola, he addresses the crowd and tries to warn them. Questa, a friend of Medoc's, tries to get Ola to release him and asks what is wrong with Medoc. Medoc says that there is something wrong going on in the colony and talks about the creatures appearing at night. Ola silences him as an announcement comes through from the controller, informing the colonists of the party to be held in the honour of the travellers. Questa tries to get Medoc to join them, but he again issues his warning to everyone. Ola moves him down along the corridor where the Doctor is lying in wait for them. He tries to talk to Medoc, but Ola ushers him into a room and locks the door, preventing the Doctor from following. He manages to pick the lock and tells an imprisoned Medoc that he wants to set him free. Medoc is skeptical at this, but listens as the Doctor asks him about the creatures he claims to have seen. But before he can answer, Medoc hears someone's coming and pushes the Doctor out of the way so he can make a break for it. He pushes past Pilot and Ola, who raise an alarm, and when they discover that the Doctor is the one that set Medoc free, Ola says that he must be sent to the work pit due to his guilt. The others arrive and Polly says that it isn't fair to imprison him as he is unaware of their laws. Pilot agrees with this but immediately grows suspicious of the Doctor when he makes a throwaway reference to Medoc escaping by crawling away. Ola says that anyone spreading rumours about the crawling creatures is sent to the hospital wing for correction. Pilot then tells Ola to take the travellers to the labour centre so that they can learn more about the colony. As they are making their way down to the labour centre, the Doctor spots Medoc hiding in a building undergoing construction but carries on not saying anything. The controller makes a colony-wide announcement, informing everyone about the search for Medoc. The travellers ask one of their guides what they do at the colony, and he gives very restrained answers, stating that they refine gas and use it for multiple purposes, all of which the colony depends on. Suddenly an alarm sounds and the guide is informed that 2 workers have been affected by gas sickness, but he says that the work needs to be done. Polly turns to address the Doctor about this strange situation, but discovers that he has slipped away. He has actually doubled back to the building where he saw Medoc hiding, and again questions him about the creatures that he saw. He says that they are nocturnal and move like insects. The doctor asks him about the other witnesses, but Medoc says that they have all been taken to the hospital for correction. They hear Ben calling for the doctor, and so he returns, casually playing his recorder, saying that he was just having a look around. Ola tells him about the curfew will soon be in effect, and everyone must be confined to whatever building that they're in, as anyone outside could be killed by Medoc. The controller makes the curfew announcement and states that the travellers will be confined to the hospitality suites. Not long after he is shown to his room, the doctor sneaks out and searches around the colony. He avoids Ola and his guard who are on patrol and have been ordered to kill on sight, and he makes his way back to Medoc's hiding place. The patrols get closer and closer to the hiding spot, and the doctor and Medoc attempt to escape through a hatch in the ground. Before they can move though, Medoc points out somebody entering the building site, and they see that it is one of the creatures that he was talking about, a gigantic crab-like alien. Episode 2. The doctor tries to keep Medoc quiet as he exclaims that he was right all along. Ola and his guards arrive, but he refuses to listen to any of Medoc's ramblings about the creatures, which he calls the Macra. The doctor tries to add his own testimony to Medoc's, but Ola ignores him and orders the guards to search them both. Ola says that they will be taken to the pilot for judgment on all their transgressions. In his office, Pilot is dictating instructions to his secretary when he receives an emergency call from Ola. He admits Ola and the doctor and then dismisses the former to carry on with his duties while he interrogates the doctor. The doctor then tries to stay on Pilot's good side by expressing his admiration for the level of technology in the colony. Pilot sees through this flattery and tries to explain the seriousness of the situation to the doctor, but he is again interrupted by Ola, who says that Medoc wishes to make a statement. Medoc enters, and rather than tell the truth of the event, he said that the doctor was attempting to make Medoc give himself up, but Ola interfered before he had a chance to. The doctor plays along with the lie. Pilot apologizes to the doctor and lets him go, telling him that Medoc will be taken to the hospital for correction so that he can rejoin the colony. Pilot explains to a clearly skeptical doctor that the original goal of the colony was to create a peaceful existence for all living there, and sometimes force is needed to ensure the success of the goal. The doctor is then escorted back to his quarters, and after he leaves, the controller messages Pilot and informs him to give the travellers high-powered adaptation treatment so they can contribute to the work in the colony. He then signs off, and his voice registers its first sign of emotion as it hysterically insists that there is no such thing as Macra. In their quarters, the travellers are asleep and are subjected to subliminal sleep treatment, which attempts to make them like the colonists. Jamie wakes up, causing the voice to stop. He tries to wake Ben up to discuss what he heard. A semi-conscious Ben tells him to go back to sleep, as they will need to be ready to go out and help in the colony in the morning, echoing the sentiments of the subliminal message. Jamie tries to go back to sleep again, but he notices the sound of gas coming into the room, and he hears the voice again. The doctor arrives a short while later and destroys the speaker above Polly's bed. He then instructs her to ignore everything she may have dreamed about, informing her of the messages that were being played to her. He then rushes to Ben and Jamie's room, who wake up when he enters. Ben tries to prevent the doctor from damaging the other speakers, and he starts to berate the others for supporting his actions. He then says he's going to report the doctor to Ola, clearly showing that he's been completely ensnared by the messages, but Jamie tries to stop him from leaving. He breaks free and rushes off to find the guards. Polly and Jamie say that they need to leave, but the doctor refuses to leave Ben. The matter is quickly resolved when Ola returns and says that he is taking the doctor into custody. Jamie tries to stand up for him, but the doctor tells him to stand down, and he willingly leaves with Ola, with Jamie going as well. As they leave, Ben calls out that he needs correction at the hospital. Polly then gives out to Ben, who tells her that they deserved it, and she runs out of the room to find where the doctor and Jamie have been taken to. Ben chases after her and follows her into the building site. She tries to hide from him, but he eventually finds her. As they struggle, Polly screams as she spots one of the crab creatures in the shadows behind them. Ben's brainwashing refuses to let him acknowledge the creature initially, but he seems to snap out of it when the creature grabs Polly and tries to pull her away. He uses a stick to hit the creature's claw, which releases Polly, and together they make a run for it as more of the creatures begin to approach them. Back in the pilot's office, Pilot and his secretary are watching Medoc undergoing the correction process, which seems to be a form of brainwashing. Medoc is resisting as much as he can, and Pilot says that there is no hope for him and that he will most likely be sentenced to the pits for life. He then goes to attend the recently arrived doctor and Jamie. The doctor confuses Pilot when he seems to show no more remorse for his actions, and is shocked when the doctor destroys another of the speakers near Pilot's desk. Pilot tells him that he will be punished, but they are interrupted by Ola, who arrives with Ben and Polly. Ola is once again dismissed, and Polly tells him what happened. However, Ben's brainwashing reasserts itself, and he loudly proclaims that he didn't see any creatures and that there is no such things as Macra. The doctor tells the others not to be too harsh on Ben, saying he's under the sway of an evil influence, and he demands that Pilot tell him who the controller is. Pilot switches on the communication with the controller, who tells them that Polly is hallucinating. Jamie says that he doesn't think the controller is real, as all they ever see of him is the same still picture of a face. The doctor also demands to see the controller in person. The image on the screen changes and they see an older, disheveled version of the man in the picture. The voice orders him to speak to them, but he is too frightened to say anything, and they watch as he is dragged away by one of the crab creatures, who knocks over the camera broadcasting the image. Pilot ushers them out of the room as Polly calls out that the Macra are in control of the colony, as one of them stares through the distorted camera lens. Episode 3. Pilot contacts the foreman in the pit and says that the travellers are to be assigned to the Danger Gang. The face of the controller appears again and commends Pilot on his decision, but instructs him to forget what he saw. Pilot then orders Ben to keep an eye on his friends and report back to him if needs be. The others are brought to the dig site and their shift leader is brought to meet them. It turns out to be Medoc, who managed to resist the brainwashing in the hospital and so has been assigned to the Danger Gang for life. He tells the others that the life expectancy for that shift is very short, but the pit foreman, whose name is Officia, tells them to hurry up and get back to work. Medoc points out that they are entitled to have a dedicated supervisor and he nominates the doctor for the role. However, the doctor, realizing that Medoc is trying to keep him safe, says that he would prefer to work in the pit and that Polly would be a better supervisor. Polly though says that she would be at a loss for what to do as a supervisor and says that she will work in the pit. Jamie quietly suggests to the doctor that he might be more useful in the control room, and so he is left in charge as Medoc, Jamie and Polly are make their way into the pits. Ben arrives and the doctor lets him know that he is aware Ben is there to spy on him. He urges him to try and fight against the brainwashing and warns him that if he continues to spy on them, then Jamie might not be as friendly as he is. Down the pit, Jamie and Polly are set to work, but not soon after, a gas strike is reported and Medoc takes them and the others to try and desperately seal it. Medoc informs that the gas is poisonous, but they have no idea why they are made to mine it. They then set about repairing the burst main that caused the strike. Jamie spots a nearby door but discovers that it is locked. Suddenly, Ben and Officia arrive and Medoc unseals the gas hole, letting a puff of it hit Officia in the face, which knocks him out. Jamie quickly searches and finds a set of keys but steps back when Ben approaches. Ben takes Officia away to recover and Polly wonders if he saw Jamie take the keys. Jamie goes to the door whilst Polly keeps a lookout. Medoc then calls everyone over to assist and Jamie uses the opportunity to go through the door. Once he's on the other side, he sees that he has entered a long tunnel which looks to be abandoned. He goes to investigate it, not noticing the scuttling of a Macra behind him. Back in the outer tunnel, an alarm goes off indicating that someone has escaped. Polly tells Medoc about Jamie and he rushes off after him, leaving Polly by herself in the tunnel. Back in the control room, the doctor is working out some calculations on a board when Pilot arrives, who takes a moment to observe the doctor at work. Pilot recognizes the formula the doctor is working on and demands to know how he figured it out. The doctor says he just worked it out by himself, but Pilot insists that he stole it as it is a secret formula known only to him and 2 others. He tells the doctor to remove it so that no one else can see it. Once he is satisfied that all traces of the formula are gone, Pilot leaves the room. Not too long after, Ben brings back a more or less fully recovered Officia, just as an alarm goes off. Officia then issues an escape to kill order on the escaped person. He then notices that his keys are gone. Pilot arrives back and puts in a request to the controller to allow the guards to access the forbidden area of the colony, but his request is denied. The doctor tries to make Officia and Pilot question the controller's decisions, but they refuse to listen to him, and so they depart. After they go, Ben addresses the doctor and tells him that he did in fact see Jamie take the keys, and he seems to be showing temporary signs of overcoming his brainwashing. Medoc quietly creeps through the tunnels looking for Jamie. He hears something behind him, but as soon as he turns around he is attacked by a Macra. Jamie hears his cries and goes after the sound. He finds Medoc's body, but then he goes into hiding as a Macra appears, but not before throwing Medoc's safety glasses at the beast. However, the Macra soon locates his hiding place and starts to snatch at him. He manages to elude it and escapes further into the tunnel. Polly arrives in the control room and sees the doctor working with a set of chemicals. He tells her that Jamie should be safe as the guards are not allowed to pursue him in the Forbidden Zone, and he then goes back to his experiment as he is trying to analyse the exact nature of the gas, but comes up with nothing. Officia arrives and the doctor hides the test tube he was looking at. The alarm has stopped and Officia tells him that it means that the guards are closing in on Jamie. Meanwhile, Ben has gone to seek out Pilot in the hopes that he will help with the conflicting emotions he is feeling due to the brainwashing fading. Pilot's secretary tries to calm him down and starts using the rhetoric of the controller, which seems to cause Ben further confusion. Pilot returns but ignores Ben's worries and listens as the controller issues a command for all security units to move away from the tunnel that Jamie is in. He then issues a command for the tunnel to be flooded with the gas. The doctor realizes that the gas wouldn't be wasted on such an effort unless it had another purpose. Polly asks what it could be and he tells her that the gas isn't being used to kill but is instead meant to keep something alive. He then rushes to a schematics board and hurriedly looks for a way to divert the gas somewhere else. In the tunnel, Jamie is avoiding more and more of the Macra as he attempts to escape the tunnel. The gas starts to pipe into the tunnel, causing him to choke badly. He sees a doorway ahead and tries to make his way towards it, but he becomes cornered by several Macra. Episode 4. The Doctor and Polly watch as Officia obeys an order by the controller to maintain a full pressure outflow into the tunnel that Jamie is in. The Doctor tells Polly to check the readout on the dials overseeing the flow, whilst he tries to figure out how to reverse the process. The Doctor starts to fiddle with various pieces of equipment and spouts off nonsensical mathematical theorems in an effort to confuse Officia into revealing the function of each piece of machinery. He eventually discovers what he is looking for, the inflow regulator, and after figuring out how it works, makes the inflow system force fresh air into the tunnel. Officia then tries to call for the guards, but the Doctor steals his keys and gives them to Polly so that she can lock the doors, thereby preventing anyone from getting in. The controller then orders the inflow of gas to resume and informs an anxious Officia that guards are on their way. Immediately, Ola and several guards begin to bang on the door, forcing the Doctor and Polly to flee towards the pit. Officia lets the guards in, and a brief struggle ensues as the Doctor and Polly try to lock the door behind them. They manage to successfully lock the door, and they discover that they are in a tunnel filled with pipes, which Polly assumes to be for the dissemination of gas throughout the colony. She is reluctant to explore further, but the Doctor reassures her that they will be safe and takes her by the hand. Meanwhile, Jamie enters an abandoned section of the tunnel in an attempt to evade the Macra, but he eventually gets cornered in a crevice and is nearly cut in half by one of their claws, but he manages to beat it away with a stick. However, his struggle causes the crevice to collapse and half bury him, leaving him easy prey for the Macra. Suddenly, the Macra begin to slump over as fresh air fills the tunnels. Jamie manages to pull himself free and runs off down the tunnel. His timing is unfortunate as he reaches an elevator just as the gas begins to flow into the tunnel again, after Officia restored the machine to its original settings. The elevator opens up just outside the Grand Hall, where Barney is leading the marching band in a new routine to boost the morale of the workers. He spots Jamie trying to sneak past him and assumes that he is one of the new dancers. Jamie plays along and begins to do a dance he calls the Highland Fling, which ends with him attempting to fling himself out of a door, but he lands into the waiting hands of Ola, Ben and some guards. Ola asks Ben to confirm his identity, an act that Ben is clearly remorseful for, but is still compelled to do. Jamie is then led away as Ben breaks down. As the Doctor and Polly are making their way through the tunnel, they hear the voice of the controller coming from up ahead. They sneak along and find the door leading to the controller's office and see that it is in fact a Macra, using various recording equipment to issue orders to the colony to maintain the flow of gas. The Doctor and Polly notice that there is a steady stream of gas pouring into the office, and the Doctor realizes that the Macra need the gas to stay alive, likening them to parasites using the humans to do what they cannot do themselves. Polly suggests that they should get Pilot and reveal the true nature of the controller to him, and they head back to find him. Pilot is actually in his office where he's in a heated debate with Ola, who is questioning his leadership abilities due to everything that has occurred. He threatens to go to the controller and highlight that only he has been successful in recapturing one of the prisoners and again blames Pilot for the disappearance of the others. Just then, the Doctor and Polly arrive, who act as if they are in no danger at all. He tries to calm Jamie down when he shouts at the Doctor to escape, and he addresses Ben, hoping that he is feeling better. Ola summons his guards to arrest him, but Pilot says that it is no longer necessary, as the Doctor points out that they have given themselves up. Before the Doctor can speak to Pilot in private, a message comes in from the controller, telling everyone, including all executives, to return to work. His voice grows more hysterical as the travellers attempt to get Pilot to ignore the voice, and their efforts are rewarded when Pilot tells Ola to leave. Ola storms out with his guards, saying that he will report to the controller, and Pilot agrees to go with the Doctor to see what they have discovered. However, no one sees Ben sneak out of the room after them. An announcement is made that the Pilot is to be arrested, and Ola is now in command in his stead. The Doctor and Pilot arrive at the command room, and Pilot is horrified to see the Macra inside, telling the Doctor that they must be destroyed. Their presence is detected by the controller, and he orders them to be killed. They make their way back to the inflow room, where they see Ola and his guards waiting for them. Ola doesn't believe his claims about the Macra, and the controller messages in, saying that they, along with Jamie and Polly, are to be locked into the pipe room. He then tells Ola to assemble all the other colonists in the Grand Hall and not to return to the pit area for 4 minutes. Ola leaves to carry out his orders, not noticing Ben on the gangway above him. The prisoners find out the meaning behind the 4 minutes when the gas begins to seep into the room, which the controller says will kill them in the allotted time. Suddenly, they hear Ben knocking on the door, saying that he can't open it. The Doctor then issues Ben instructions on how to reverse the flow of the gas. The controller tries to reassert control over Ben, but to no avail, and he calls in vain for the guards to return. He then tries to convince the Doctor that this will lead to an explosion that will destroy the colony, but in actuality it will only affect the tunnel and the control room containing the Macra. Ben throws the switch at the Doctor's command, ending the Macra threat to the colony. Later on, the marching band is giving a performance to show their appreciation for the travellers saving their colony. Ben looks for the Doctor as he has overheard something important, and Jamie says that he is playing his recorder for a group of colonists. Ben informs him that it is planned for them all to become members of the colony, and the Doctor will fulfill the role of pilot. The Doctor then says that they need to leave right away, and suggests that they take a leaf out of Jamie's book and dance their way out the Grand Hall to the applause of the colonists. End of the story.
Yay!
Yay! Happy fun times, everyone. Now that the story is recapped, we're going to go over to the trivia spot with Tricia. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So, the original air date for this story was the 11th of March to the 1st of April 1967.
Ending on the April 1st just adds more comedic value to this fucking story.
The writer for the story is Ian Stewart Black. Now, we have mentioned Ian before. He previously wrote The Savages and The War Machines. This is his third and final credit for Doctor Who, so we will not be discussing Ian's work again. Though if you are a fan of his stuff and you're a fan of these stories, he did also write the 3 Target novelizations for them, which we've discussed before. I really like when the writer does them because they often put in things that maybe were in the original script and things like that, so I always like that. Ian sadly passed away back in 1997. The director for the story is John Davies. This is his only Doctor Who directing credit. He recalled in the DVD commentary on the animated version that the brief he was given was make it frightening. Now, I've seen a few clips of the actual version.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if frightening is really the word I would use. The animated version, though, they went hard on the frightening aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Because all 4 of these episodes are currently missing, he's actually one of 3 directors in the position where none of his original work on Doctor Who is available in the BBC archives. The other 2 are Michael Leeston Smith and Hugh David, who we've both discussed before.
That's like, there's so much about the missing stories, like that there's various legacies left behind. Like you, in terms of like, you know, like you had Marco Polo, which would be the first kind of, I suppose, big grandiose historical, and like that was like Waris's that was done by Waris Hussein after, you know, the very first story, so that's kind of missing. And then you have like all these other fantastic stories that are missing, and there was all some interconnected kind of stuff, so he's in very select company.
Yeah, indeed. So some of the working titles for the story were The Spider-Men, plural, The Insect Men, and The Macras. Spider-Men and Insect Men are probably the most interesting titles because throughout the story we hear the Macra described as being insect-like, which makes no sense when you have the visual of a giant crab, both in the animated version and in the original version. This is because the final design wasn't agreed upon when the scripts were finished. So the scripts were written with the idea that it would be an insect-like being or a spider-like being, and that's what the scripts were written for. And when they decided to go with a crab, they just didn't change the way they were described. Which, when you're watching it, you're like, what sort of weird insects do you be looking at? Do you think that looks like an insect?
I think this might be like a progenitor to Pokemon, you know, it's Insecto Crab, go!
This story was the first to use the new title sequence, which incorporated the image of the Doctor's face. This is something that I love in the classic stories, and I'm really gutted that they didn't do it in New Who, because I think it's great to sort of, particularly because in classic, because while there are small variations on the theme from one Doctor to another, and sometimes from season to season, they rework the intro title a little bit.
Yeah.
It's always nice when you hear that opening few beats and you see the face and you know exactly who you're watching.
Because actually they did kind of do it for Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi's seasons. So I think it was like Matt Smith's second season, his face kind of flashes in like kind of a nebulous type cloud. And then for Peter Capaldi's one, which is like, you know, very timey-wimey, because like, it was all Clarkson type stuff, his attack eyebrows kind of make an appearance.
Yeah, but it's not the same as
it's not the same as like the full Tom Baker dead passport photo stare, you know. Or John Pertwee's really weird smile. But what's actually kind of cool is that, do you remember when we did an adventure in Space and Time? Yeah, I got the title right. Do you remember they flirted with the idea
of putting Hartnell's face in there?
And there was like Reverend Pinfield's just like, oh Jesus Christ, no, that's terrifying. To be fair, like, it's probably down to the guy that they got to do the fucking stand-in.
Well, in fairness, like, I mean, the technology has grown and evolved over
Yeah.
the years.
But it's amazing. It's amazing the difference. Like, what was it, 3 years, nearly 4 years will make in terms of, like, even back then, production style and production value and stuff.
Yeah. Where was I? Yeah. So first, I have the new face, which actually in the animated version looks really cool. I think it came out really well. In the original script, the Doctor was actually sent to the Hospital for Correction, which was originally called the House of Correction, alongside Medoc, and it was only after brainwashing attempts failed that he was sent to the pit. So originally they were, because they keep threatening this Hospital for Correction, and no one ever goes there. Originally in the script he did go there. It
just reminds you, like, the Shining was like, I'm afraid I had to correct them. It was just like, ugh.
So the Macra is basically a giant crab, and I say the Macra is a giant crab because for the original production they had one that they had to repurpose for each shot. That included, like, in the scenes with Jamie where there's meant to be like multiple Macra coming at him, they had to like film it and lock it and then film it and lock it off so they could duplicate the Macra. And at the end, when the Macra is where you have like the lead Macra, like the Macra leader, it's a slightly different colour. They had to repaint the entire thing because they only had the one.
Palette swap.
Yeah. Nobody particularly liked the prop. It was really big, it was really heavy, it was difficult to transport, and it was difficult to move. And apparently Innes Lloyd actually went to the BBC. So this was an external prop, an external company made it. And so Innes Lloyd went to the BBC visual effects department to ask them to verify if it was actually worth the £500 he had spent.
Just you got reamed.
Yeah, so he clearly didn't like it. None of the actors really liked it either. It just wasn't fit for purpose. So in terms of the adaptation and the animation style, it really benefits from the animation as well. So talking about the animation, so as I mentioned, all 4 episodes of the story are currently missing from the archives. There's a fair few screenshots, in fairness, or like telesnaps, and there is some surviving footage for the same reason that we've discussed before, where it was too violent for Australia, so it was censored out. So if you see a continuous clip, odds are that is from Australia because they didn't want to actually show it.
Actually, do you remember when we were talking about the drinking game that the guys over in Half Measures created? They actually posted the gift of like Ben and Polly like recoiling in terror. That's actually from this story.
It is, yeah. So we were able to watch this story though in its entirety. I'm going to put quotes on that for the moment, because the BBC has animated this entire story. So all 4 episodes have been animated, which is great, and they're available on Blu-ray and DVD. I know the Blu-ray release, I don't know if the DVD release includes all of this, but I know the Blu-ray release does, where you have animation in colour, animation in black and white, and then the reconstructions of the episodes, both with narration by Annika Wills and without narration by Annika Wills. I don't know if all of that is on the DVD.
I think it's all, I don't have the Blu-ray copy, and I'm pretty sure that's all on it.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. Because I have this steelbook and I don't know which bits are specific or whatever. So you've a lot of variety when watching this on the DVD. Personally, I watched the colour version, and I also watched the reconstruction bits just to see what it was like, because I was curious as to certain bits. There are some changes though between the original version and the animated, and some of these do impact the story in a way and some of them don't. So the first big one is the removal of the makeover sequence. So in the animated version, they go to the refreshing department, which isn't for refreshments, as Ben thought, but is to refresh yourself. And basically, they have a makeover. Polly gets her hair cut. The Doctor gets put in brand new clothes, and like his hair is all done, and he hates it, and he ends up going through like a rumple machine to re-rumple himself. Jamie is like, I'm not a girl, stop stop touching me. And Ben's just getting a suntan, loving life. That entire segment was removed from the animated version.
And like it's also, so I have two things, right? One is the animation doesn't help this continuity based conversation that's kind of sprung up as of late as to Polly's hair.
Yeah.
No, she what she does is she asks for a shampoo, not a haircut, a shampoo. So I know nothing about women's hair other than that they have it. So I'm wondering, would that kind of account for the fact that her hair is long again at the start of the next story?
No, so that's a whole different thing. So I'll get into that in a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But basically, Polly gets her hair cut in part of that sequence. That's what happens. So during that sequence, Polly gets a haircut. In the animation, they made it even more confusing because without that sequence, they still wanted to have Polly with her sort of pixie haircut. Yeah. So they had her starting the story, and actually there's a little clip that's an animated version of the end of the moon base.
Which is a surviving episode.
Which is a surviving episode. They animated the end of it in black and white and gave Polly the pixie haircut. So they've done this weird thing where I'm sure most fans don't care. But from a continuity perspective, and if you're a fan of Polly, her hair in this just makes no fucking sense whatsoever. A few other things, all of the characters except Ben were the same clothes throughout. In the original story, there was changes. Jamie was meant to wear that shorts and double-breasted jacket. Polly, Ben and Jamie are all sleeping in the same room, whereas the Doctor gets his own room. Originally, Ben and Jamie were together. Polly was in a room by herself.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. And the Doctor had a room to himself.
It's the future. They've forgotten your primitive notions of modesty.
Yeah, but still. So in the animation, Ben, Polly and Jamie are all in the same room. They made the attack of the Macra on Polly in the animation, in my opinion, better. Because the Macra actually picks her up. And, they can do all that in animation that they clearly couldn't do with the prop. They also gave the Macra legs. Apparently, the original prop wasn't very good at scuttling.
No.
You mentioned in your summary that Jamie sees Medoc's body.
Yes.
In the animation, they changed that to imply that Medoc has been sort of melted, as there's a puddle of ooze that's left. There's 3 female characters in this, 2 of whom have names, and 1 of whom doesn't, who were all basically made one character. So their original characters were Chicky, Sunna, and Pilot's secretary. They were 3 different people. So there's 3 different female characters that they interact with at one point.
All of whom have no bearing on the story whatsoever.
No, they don't whatsoever. They're just women that they talk to. And in the animation, they just have them all be the same person. They use the same design for all of them. When we see Into the Control Room, so both when the Doctor and Polly see in, and when the Doctor and Pilot see in the original, there was 1 Macra, because they had 1 prop. In the animation, there's a few of them, which makes sense. And lastly, we have the final sequence. So this is something where, we don't dock points in our overall for production choices, right? We tend to go with the story rather than the visuals because, times change and visuals age.
Although we have had discussions about the costumes and stuff from the Web Planet.
Yeah.
But anyway.
The final sequence of the Doctor and companions taking a leaf out of Jamie's book and dancing their way out of the colony isn't there.
Yeah.
So you have Ben telling the Doctor, oh, they want to make you Pilot, and the Doctor saying, oh, we should leave. And it just pans up.
Yeah.
And ends. So you don't actually know how they left.
And it's weird, because so when I'm doing the reviews, right, obviously I will be typing away at stuff. Now for the missing stuff, what I do is I go to TARDIS Wikia. It's one of the fandom wikias, just to kind of see if there's a difference, and usually there's some plot elements that they leave out that I make sure to include and whatever. But they mentioned like this makeover section, and I was like, what fucking makeover section? So then I actually went and I watched the reconstruction thing. I was like, for me, this is actually kind of important because it tells a lot about Jamie's character. He's very shy around girls. He seems to have a small bit of a crush on Polly because Polly is sort of like doting over him, going, don't you look lovely? Oh, look at you, you're and he's like, stop it. And it's like, I think that's a kind of a cool...
Ben's there sunning himself. And we get a lot of insight into the Doctor where he likes his rumble-tumble look.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like the idea of, don't give me... he doesn't like wearing like ironed clothes and whatever.
Because it's actually very important to the characters, all of them in one way, shape or form, but specifically Jamie and the Doctor, because it will indicate how Jamie will work around female story-based companions if he's by himself with them. And with the Doctor as well, as the whole thing of, his previous incarnation was always very pristinely dressed, whereas this version is the complete opposite, and it seems to be integral to his character that
he's a hobo by choice.
Yeah, I always make the kind of comparison, like when I have to go to work and when the client is ever appearing in work or stuff like that, I have to wear a suit, and I always say to everyone, I cannot wait to get this fucking thing off me because I feel like a bear that has been dressed up for a special occasion. And yeah, like I don't mind wearing suits except for for weddings and proper stuff, but I have to wear it to work. I just feel completely like a show pony, and I'm like, I don't like this. I want to be free. So yeah, I don't like the fact that they removed... I know that, no, they've said that it's down to animation costs.
My thing... So a lot of these are down to animation costs, right? And my thing on that, and because you and I have discussed this privately before, that one of the reasons why they haven't done Marco Polo is because there's a lot of costume changes in Marco Polo, and they would have to create new assets of each character every time. And my response to that is... I'll be honest. Bullshit.
Yeah.
If you're going to animate the story, animate the fucking story. And try to be as true to the story as you can possibly be. I don't mind adding things that you wanted to do but couldn't. So in terms of having more Macra present, that's fine. Or like was it in Power where we have like the Dalek production line?
Yeah.
Or whatever. That's fine because that was implied in the original. It just couldn't be done in the original.
Yeah.
But like, it comes across as lazy. Like, we couldn't be bothered doing an asset of Polly with long hair and an asset of Polly with short hair. Or we couldn't be bothered changing Jamie's clothes because Jamie was meant to wear the same clothes as Ben.
Yeah.
And my thing with that is just like, well, if you're going to animate the story, then animate the story. Because otherwise what you're doing is you're doing an adaptation of XYZ, not an animation of XYZ. And that's my personal opinion on it. I think it was most evident in this story. I'm sure it's probably been in the others as well, and we just haven't noticed them quite as much.
Well, see, I've gone back and I've looked, and I think there's only one major change, and it's that in Power, when the Doctor plays his recorder for the very first time, he does a little bit of a jig, and apparently in the show that's a lot more animated than what we got in the actual recreate or the animation that they did. Like, no, they still did it, but apparently it was a bit more animated, so therefore it was tougher to animate.
Yeah.
But here it's like, look, you're kind of taking away a character moment. Now, I know it seems a bit silly, but at the same time, silly stuff leads to good character development. And also you've taken away the actual ending.
Yeah, and like my thing of it is, if you're going to do an animation, and particularly Macra Terror, I'll be interested to see next week's one as well.
Yes.
Because like the Macra Terror, it got a DVD and Blu-ray release. They're doing a black and white version and a coloured version. And they're doing it like the steelbook release, and they're making it this big thing. Stop making multiple versions of it and make one that's good. I would rather have had a complete story in black and white.
If fucking if money is an issue, stop fucking colouring it in. It was broadcast in black and white. Just
leave it in black and white.
You can call it noir. It's fine. It's people like that. I like that.
Or you can call it Doctor Who from the 60s.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, that was a bit long-winded. The reason why we're putting this in the trivia was if you're watching it yourself, you're going to see a few differences from what Paddy described because there was scenes taken out and stuff was slightly edited. But also because I personally felt quite strongly on it. It really bothered me. But when Paddy and I discussed would we include it in our overall, we kind of decided that we tend to, or we try not to, dock points based purely on recreation choices. We don't, slam loose cannon for what they do, and like some of their recreation choices are unique.
Oh, wait till you get to Evil of the Daleks. My God, it's fantastic.
But like we don't dock points because of the guys working with what they have. So we weren't going to dock points for this either, but we wanted to mention it.
Yeah.
Now we've mentioned it, I'll move on. So before we jump into the cast, one last point just for everyone's benefit. The Macra do return. So the Macra return again in Gridlock, which is a series 3. This is David Tennant and Martha.
Yes.
Story, set on New Earth. And so they return in that story. And again, Paddy, you could maybe confirm if this is present on the DVD, but on the Blu-ray, Gridlock is included as a bonus episode.
I don't have Gridlock on my thing.
Okay, that's probably what the difference was. So with the Steelbook.
Yeah.
Cool. So on to our cast. This trivia section has gone on way longer than usual.
It's trivia, therefore it's interesting.
So onto our cast. So as Medoc, we have Terence Lodge. This is the first of 3 Doctor Who acting appearances for Terence. We'll see him again in Carnival of Monsters and Planet of the Spiders. His other acting credits include An Age of Kings, The Avengers, Ding, Softly Softly, Z-Cars, Double Ding, The Bill, and London's Burning.
I feel like we can start including Softly Softly like as a potential bingo card, because like you've got that and you've got Dixon of Dock Green, and there's a few other ones there.
There's a few that I'm just like, I've mentioned that before, I'll mention it again. As pilot, we have Peter Jeffrey. This is the first of 2 Doctor Who acting credits for Peter. We'll see him again in The Androids of Tara. Peter was actually considered for the role of the second Doctor before they decided on Patrick Troughton.
You know what? I'll talk about it based on the filmography there now, but I actually quite enjoy Peter Jeffrey, and I think he's one of those people that you would be very interested to see him in the role,
So his other credits include Villette, Napoleon and Love, The Return of the Pink Panther, Jack and Ori, Crown Court, and The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Which I fucking love. It is.
I was going through his filmography, and obviously a lot of these people, this show is from the 60s, their filmographies are incredibly long. I'm not going to list them all. So I tend to go through and I find things that they played a prominent role in, or it's something that we'll have heard of. And when I saw The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, I just got flashbacks to WarpCon in general. Yes. Because it's always mentioned at some point. And I was like, I have to include it for Paddy's benefit. I have to include it. So I don't know who he played in that. You can look that up for yourself.
He plays the Ottoman Sultan. So, not Baron Munchausen. Also, did you mention Androids of Tara? Yeah?
Androids of Tara, yeah, he's in that as well.
Cool. Fun fact, that is the story that I watched, I think, my first night in Castle Gregory ever.
Oh.
Yeah.
How come you watched that and I didn't?
Because I think you went to bed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was on my actual initial run through of the story, so I was trying to watch one story a night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like, what are you doing watching a sneaky Doctor Who while I'm asleep? Peter passed away, sadly, in 1999. Ola is played by, I'm going to get this wrong, Gerton Klauber?
Yeah, I think that's,
That's the most horrible way I could pronounce it, but it's the best way I can do it. This is his second and final appearance in Doctor Who. We previously saw him in The Romans. Oh, amazing story. Where he played the Galley Master. Gerton's other credits include, now he had a long list of stuff. He has Jesus of Nazareth, Paul of Tarsus, Anna Karenina, Sherlock Holmes. He was in several Carry On films. I started going through, I stopped copying them all over because there's too many. The Avengers, Wuthering Heights, Octopussy, which I included again for your benefit, and Blackadder the Third.
And yes, I remember where he is the mad King George who ends every sentence with the word penguin. He was like, you as Prince Regent and I as King Penguin. Actually, when you were going through the thing, it's like, it was Jesus of Nazareth, Paul of Tarsus, and I just in my head went, Anna of Corinna, Sherlock of Holmes.
So did I when I was writing the list. Gerton passed away back in 2008. Lastly, as Officia, we have John Harvey. We previously discussed John when talking about the War Machines, where he played Professor Brett. And this is his final acting credit for Doctor Who. I'm not going to describe his whole thing again because I described it back in the War Machines, and people can go back and listen to it there.
Absolutely, and you can listen to us give out about said War Machines.
Yeah.
What does that smoke do? So thank you very much for a very awesome and interesting trivia section. Lots to talk about there. Would actually, anyone's actually seen the animated version of this story, we'd love to get your thoughts on it to see whether or not you felt the same way about the animation. I was trying to say dismissals or subtractions.
Changes.
Omissions. That's the word I was thinking of. Omissions. So yeah, now as always, we're going to move on to the main part of the podcast, which is the character discussion, starting off with the Doctor, going on to the companions, both regular and story-based, and then the villains. And then before we give our overall scoring. So I went first last week, I think, on the Doctor. So how about you start us off this week?
Cool. So thing for me is, with the exception of Jamie's time in the mine shaft, Doc Pat does most of the work, I think, in this story of our standard crew. I think he carries it quite well. I think the pilot had no idea what to fucking do with him. So he was like, every time the pilot was given an out of like, oh, but like, I'm here now, so you don't have to worry. He's like, yeah, cool. What he said. He genuinely has no clue what to do with him. My thing with the Doctor in this episode, though, and I don't know, maybe I need to watch it again, but after egging Ben and Jamie on in the capture of Medoc, and like, if you watch the episode with subtitles on, which I do for reasons, he's very much get him, hold him down, like, he's very much involved in egging the two of them on in capturing Medoc. He then tries to protect him and free him.
So I think it might be an initial, I have to make sure that, like, you know, like, oh, my friends need to be safe from this person, because I think had Ola and the guards not arrived as soon as they did, I think there would have been a case of, okay, now my friend, now that you're calmed down, like, kind of jokingly, he would have struck up the conversation then. Maybe,
yeah, but like, again, if you watch the episode, and listen, I watch it with subtitles on, so a lot of times when they're talking over each other, I can see who's saying what. He gets very into it.
Oh.
Do you know? It's not like don't hurt him or be careful, it's get him.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's very much like a mob mentality. So for me, I thought it was very interesting that he went from that side of things to suddenly wanting to protect him and to free him. And I get the fact that he's clearly interested in what Medoc saw.
Yeah.
In how it ties into the big claw thingy. But like, he hasn't spoken to any of the administration about the big claw thingy up to now. Like, for all he knows, that's a native animal to this planet that they're well aware of. It's a complete non-issue. Do you know? So I found that a bit weird.
Well, I suppose one thing that maybe is that so clearly the Macra are, what would you say they are, about maybe 15, 20 foot tall?
I'd say probably 15.
Yeah, judge on the animation side things.
Yeah.
So I think if they're like, and I suppose with anything to do with any sort of a colony on it, especially when it comes to terraforming a planet, you usually see a small bit of hesitance from the colonists to actually venture outside. So no, this could just me kind of completely over correcting or over making, like, you know, assumptions of is that he, by the fact that the guys don't seem alarmed to get back to the colony away from these giant fucking 15-foot whatever, maybe the Doctor's like, well, this seems kind of oddly suspicious.
Yeah, but also maybe they're just a non-issue for them.
Possibly,
you know?
Yeah.
They know they're there. It doesn't matter. So that, for me, I think could have done a little bit more explanation, because, like, watching it, I was sort of like, it looks like he's just being a busybody for the sake of it. Do you know?
I think this might actually be a kind of a recurring theme over the last couple of stories, because you remember we've said that there are certain things that happen or are mentioned, and that's it. There's just a mention. They're left. Like, why are the colonists fighting in Power of the Daleks?
Yep.
The Cybermen just casually mention, "Oh, we're aware of you." It's like, how? Like, these little threads that are there and they're just dropped for the sake of progressing the story, maybe.
Yeah. So that I got over it fairly quickly, but like initially I was like, hey, so these people are being very welcoming to you. You haven't even asked them. They tell you that Medoc is dangerous. They tell you that he needs to be sent to the hospital for correction or whatever. But the doctor doesn't actually ask them in any great detail what's wrong with him, what did he do, what's illegal about it. So for him to suddenly like try to stage a jailbreak on his own, it seems a bit higgledy-piggledy for me. The other thing is, I'm surprised he didn't do more to try and break Ben out of the mind control, because we've seen him do it before. So I'm surprised we didn't have like Jamie hold him down, and then the doctor tried to hypnotize him like he did with Dodo in the War Machines. The story that introduced Ben.
Yeah.
So that kind of surprised me that he just kept he just accepted it. And it didn't seem like he was doing anything to rescue Ben.
Yeah, because it actually leads to a very interesting interaction in my notes about the Doctor. But one thing that I suppose is we have the benefit of knowing that later down the line, the Doctor isn't above using his friends as bait, as such. Maybe that was a potential here, where by having Ben still be brainwashed, it might have been playing into his own investigations. Maybe.
It rubbed me the wrong way. Do you know that he just kept saying to Jamie and Polly like, "Oh, there's nothing we can do." And first he was like, "It's not Ben's fault. Don't hold it against him," because Jamie gets very traitor.
Yeah.
But we have seen him break people from mind control before.
Yeah.
So it seemed a bit odd that he didn't even try. Even if we just saw Ben hold him down so I can try and break the mind control, and then Ben runs. Do you know? Even a mention of it. Other than that though, so those two things I found a little bit odd. Generally speaking though, I mean, this is pure Patrick Troughton, subverting all expectations when it comes to the people that they're interacting with. They kind of expect him to be one way. He goes complete 180 degrees in the opposite direction. We get to see him sciencing things out a bit and all that kind of stuff. So all of that's great. I think he carries the story really well. I just think that there's a few little tweaks that could have been made to make it better.
I could see that. I'd say that. All right. Were you happy that he, as opposed to having a big checklist, he did science on a board? Were you happy with that?
He did do science on a board. That's actually one of the edits I forgot to mention in the trivia. Originally, he was doing it on a pipe. Mm-hmm. It was right on the wall. So I like the fact that he was doing science on a board. Now, why he scribbled out his science as opposed to rubbing it out makes no sense. But he did science on a board and he got 11 out of 10.
And that also, that chemical formula, that's
a series of...
Yeah, no, but no, that seemed to be another plot element and it just fucking kind of dangled, because it's never made reference that that's how he found out what the gas was for or anything like that.
Yeah, what the fuck was that? Was that the controlling agent? Was that the agent that the Macra need? I'll get to that more later on about the gas, but yeah.
I really like the... No, I think Patrick Troughton is just any worries that he would have had about him taking over the role, they're gone. They're completely gone at this stage. I think he's great in the role. He's kept a kind of that through line of certain aspects of the Doctor, and he's mimicked William Hartnell for it perfectly. But he's also brought enough new stuff that you can kind of go, it's almost original series, Next Generation. They're both Star Trek, but I can like aspects of one over the other, and vice versa. Like his comedic timing. I really want to see if anyone's out there that actually has a copy of the Macra Terror, like the existing edition, they're holding on to it for money, you pricks. I really just want to see like the scene where he just wrecks his brand new clothes, because it's like, yes, that's better.
That's always like, Paddy wants the person who has the copy of the Macra Terror, please share it with him so he can see it. Also, you're a prick. It's a great way to ingratiate someone.
I know. I like, what did we talk last week about? If you piss me off, I hold a grudge. But there was one other thing that I liked it. I think it's again foreshadowing something that's developed much further down the line of Doctor Who, is this concept of the angry Doctor. Not angry at the villain or angry at like the story-based companions, but angry at his friends. And it's when he walks into the room and he sees Ben as being conflicted, he just goes, Ben, how are you keeping? And it's like just that very... And what I like it too, it's when your best friend is mad at you and is just giving you like the cold shoulder treatment, and you're like, fuck. Lower those eyebrows. But did you kind of get that as well? Or do you see where I'm coming from with that?
I do see where you're coming from. I didn't quite catch it the same way you do, maybe because you don't give me that treatment anywhere near as often as I give it to you. What I did pick up on, though, is when Ben is spying, not really trying to hide it, on the Doctor, and the Doctor's like, Jamie won't appreciate this the same way I do.
Yeah.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Like Jamie won't take this the same way I do.
Yeah, it's like he won't be as like forgiving as I am or something like that. Yeah.
And it's like, help Ben then. And that's what brings it back around to the fact that he doesn't even try to undo the brainwashing. It's like he knows that Jamie is feeling very betrayed.
Yeah.
Doesn't really understand all that's happening. And instead of trying to bring Ben back, he warns Ben, basically, don't be surprised if Jamie jumps you.
Yeah.
And it's like, that for me was a bit much.
Because, like, again, like, if this was part of some sort of, like, he wanted to, like, he knows that the brainwashing can be beaten without external influences, like, because Medoc clearly is resistant to it in some way, shape, or form. So, if this is trying to put, Ben be his own savior, again, it's not mentioned in the resolution, be it in the actual thing or in the animation. It's not. And, like, we'll get to Ben there now in a while, but, when he's there kind of giving guidance to Ben, he's walking through things step by step. It's like, this is the relationship that you normally have with Ben, where you trust him with your life and you trust him with the lives of the others. Like, it's a case of, it is very weird. And again, it's fantastic acting by Patrick Troughton, because, as I've always said, like, while he is a fantastic comedic actor, he's just a great actor in general, and he's very. It can be very disarming, or it can seem very soft the way he asked Ben, "How are you keeping?" But there's a lot of stuff going on behind those simple words,
Yeah, I would agree. I think that whole aspect of using companions. So he left Ben be mind controlled and didn't do anything to stop it because he thought Ben could fight it himself and come around later, and when he does that, Ben might have some inside information that the Doctor was missing. And we will see in the future that comes up time and again. With one Doctor in particular, it's very much part of his motif.
Yep.
It's a part of the Doctor's motif I don't particularly enjoy. And I think that's the thing about the Doctor, though, is that, like, you can love the Doctor, but there are aspects of the Doctor's personality that you don't like as a fan.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine.
Absolutely.
The idea of leaving his companions to suffer, personally, that's a negative for the Doctor. It's not a negative for Pat, it's not a negative for whatever, but the fact that they decided to do that with the character, for me, is a negative.
I think that's why like the show is so interesting, is because that the Doctor isn't White Knight. And even from the early days, like even like in the glory days, like the golden days of like when you had like Tom Baker there, he's still not a White Knight because he's still shady in various different things, whether he has it with the companions or with the villains. And then like you kind of go like, you know, we've talked about the true line between all the various incarnations of him. This is also that same true line, whereas like there is a manipulative nature to him as well.
Yeah.
And he rationalizes it as like, I won't say the ends justify the means, but it has all been building to something and everything should have benefited from it type thing, you know?
Yeah. I think you can actually probably, now that I think about it, I think you can actually probably track it back to the Daleks. And this idea of lying to the companions about the mercury in the fluid link because he wanted something. And I think you can start it from there, really. Because, I mean, the pilot story, the original, like, Unearthly Child, that has all this other drama surrounding it. So leave that aside. But the Daleks, it's him using other people, playing on them and their thoughts and their knowledge or lack thereof for an outcome that he wants.
But like, even if you want to go, like, say a small bit further, like I won't say a small bit further along, but if you want to go further along, when the Doctor has gone away from like the early curmudgeon days, leaving going to the chase, as you kind of said, like he leaves Stephen to die type thing. Stephen, who was the person that helped him get out, it's like, you know, very kind of coldly, look, he went back for a fucking teddy bear, leave him type thing, you know. But yeah, so I think we've mentioned one particular person an awful lot during the Doctor's discussion. So how about we move on to Ben?
Poor Ben.
He looks like such a kicked puppy when he starts to fight back against the brainwashing.
He does. There's two things there. So A, he looks like a kicked puppy in the animation. Also, is it just me, right? Or do they animate him with an extraordinarily large head compared to the rest of his body?
That I didn't pay attention to. But he does sort of, like, you think about it now, there is sort of a bobblehead type.
His head is very disproportionate to the rest of him. I have a similar comment about the animation choice for Jamie, but Ben's head seems like huge and rectangular.
He was stung by a bee, okay? Leave him alone.
Anyway, yeah, no, I think this is another story where a lot comes across in the audio. Fair dues to Michael Craze, a lot comes across in the audio.
Oh, his performance in this is fantastic.
But I would really love to see the original, to see
the torture,
the conflict.
Yeah.
Do you know, because clearly at several points there is this massive internal struggle between the brainwashing component and the man we know Ben to be. Like the fact that he, you know, for the first time ever, doesn't stand by Polly.
Yeah.
He's not supporting Polly. Like we said in the moon base that him and Polly kind of have it off because of this is man's work or whatever, but that was different. That was a protective thing. Yeah. But this is the one time where he doesn't protect her.
No. And like I think the concept of a companion, like they flirted with it a small bit with Dodo under Wotan's influence, but that was just handled kind of poorly. Whereas here we actually get to see a negative influence of the Doctor's brain, or a companion's brainwashing against the group, and like Michael Crace's performance in this is fantastic. It's probably one of his best performances.
I think so too.
Because, and again, it ties back to stuff like we discussed from the 10th Planet, in that he can play a tortured person very well. In the emotional struggles. And like again, like when he has to give up Jamie after Ola and the guys capture Jamie after he does the Highland fling, it's like, yes, like that scene immediately goes from comedic to kind of soul wrenching because he can't stop the compulsion to out his friend. Yeah,
and I think we mentioned the Wotan thing with Dodo and Polly with Wotan, and this is written by the same person.
Maybe
the same writer.
Maybe he learned from his mistake.
Yeah, so I wonder if this is him sort of taking a few of the elements from that and really doubling down on it in a believable way, because we get to see the entire gamut.
Yeah.
Now, would I still have preferred the Doctor make an attempt to help him get better? Yes, I would. Given the performance that Michael Craze put in, I would like it to have been an attempt.
Yeah.
And then we still get this wonderful performance.
A question for you.
Mm.
When Ben is fully under the trial of the brainwashing, right? I got an impression that had Ben not been a companion, say if they had met Ben while he was on duty on his ship, I feel like that this is what Ben would be like if he wasn't a companion, if he was on active duty as a sailor.
I can see that because from what we've seen of Ben is he is a bit of a cheeky chappy from time to time.
Oh yeah, he's pure.
But anytime they're in any sort of military installation whatsoever, be that the moon base, 10th planet, whatever, it's always, yes sir.
Yeah.
How can I help, sir? It's very much ingrained in him. You know, and while he still might say like, you know, I'll have you, mate, you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
He still says it with his own Cockney accent and blah,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah. It's in there that there is protocol, there is law, there is rule, there is command, there is structure. You follow that. So yeah, I would agree. I think, you know, maybe not quite as zealously.
No.
In terms of the more emotional components. But I think in terms of like day to day, like I think it's very much what Ben is probably like when he's on duty.
Yeah, and like it would have been, I think, interesting to see. Like, I like Ben's introduction to the story, like, or into the universe of Doctor Who. I really enjoy it. It would have been potentially interesting to see had he been introduced while he was on active duty. But who knows? Maybe there's an alternate universe out there where Ben did encounter Ben in such a way. But I think no, this is going to be one for the Rambling in terms of best performance.
Oh, definitely. Like, I'm going to say right now, in terms of Michael Craze's best performance, this is definitely up there. In terms of Ben's best stories, it's up there as well. But in terms of the delivery from Michael Craze, definitely.
Because like we've talked before, especially when it comes to the missing stories, the audio is key to the hook. And like we discussed it a lot with Marco Polo, we discussed it with stuff like the Crusade, even like the Daleks Master Plan, like that we joke about how much of a slog that was, but at least it was an enjoyable roller coaster, except for episode 7, because of everyone involved in it. Yeah,
I think the thing with Ben, and we'll probably get to this when we do our rambling when Ben eventually leaves, but the thing with me for Ben is, throughout these discussions, because so much of Ben and Polly's, but so much of Ben's stuff is missing.
Yeah.
Ben, for me, between the Doctor, Ben, Polly, and now Jamie, Ben is really the character in this last run that I want to see. I really want to see what Michael did because his voice acting sounds so amazing.
Yeah.
And you know, we know that the animation, they cut corners, they don't really like making new assets. So for me, I think at the moment, like of all the companions that we currently have, the Doctor, Ben, Polly and Jamie, whatever, it's Ben that I want to see the live action version of, to see how did he play this out, more so than I want to see, you know, Polly in the Underwater Menace or whatever. Do you know?
No. Absolutely. So, Polly next?
Indeed. I don't know about you, but I think this episode should be renamed The Perils of Polly.
Yeah, like, we're drifting into yo-yo territory now here, where we had the Highlanders.
Yeah.
Excellent. We had the Underwater Menace, Boo Earns. We
had some redeeming moments.
But that's why we said Boo Earns. Then we had the Moon Base, which was, again, back up there. Now we're back to seriously fucking Boo Earns. Like,
yeah, my issue with Polly in this is we discussed at length I think when I said it, I think it was about like 15-20 minutes we were discussing Polly in The Underwater Menace. We discussed at length how flippy floppy her character was in that story.
Yeah.
And how the sort of perils of Polly part massively contradicted with everything else, but at least she got her redeeming moments,
yeah,
which were really important to us, because Polly is a very strong person who is capable of overcoming her fears very well.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is worse than The Underwater Menace because there's no redeeming moment whatsoever.
There's not. And like, okay, now one thing I can possibly say in defense of Polly in this story, okay, is that she was picked up by a fucking 15-foot crab. And up until now, every villain that she has faced has been more or less humanoid in nature. With the exception of the Daleks. But that's on a, like, Daleks are what, like fucking 5'8"? That's still on a manageable level. This is the first time when the villain for Polly has been a monstrosity.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Yeah. No, as I say, that's not to excuse a lot of the fucking bullshit that happens in this story when it comes to Polly. Because
I'd accept that as one possible reason, right?
Yeah.
But similar to the fact that, like, we used Polly's near forced body mutilation in The Underwater Menace as an explanation as to why she panics and freaks out later.
Yeah.
In that episode. But we also said that that doesn't really fly as a reason. I think, yeah, Polly faces this 15-foot crab thing that lifts her up in the air. She also has her companion in the form of Ben turn against her and call her a liar, basically. But for me, in terms of, like, Polly can't do anything against the Macra physically.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of people there. Polly is a people person.
Kick him in the dick. No,
Kick him in the dick or talk them round. That's where her skill set lies, and I don't think they utilize that. Like, even like once they went down into the pit, I was looking for conversations between her and Medoc, or her and Officia. Maybe getting Officia to turn tail. So there's plenty of human interactions that could have been had that they didn't.
And, like, this is the first time that Polly has kind of fallen into the Dodo Susan category of companion, which is a fucking shame, because we've talked at length about how Polly is a companion that actually really we felt has been I won't say maligned, but misrepresented.
Yeah, definitely.
In modern discussion about Classic Who. And especially for me, because the first time I ever went through this, I was like, fuck it, she's grand, she's not the worst, she's not the best, but she's there. Here it's a case of, no, Polly, I think, is a vital representation of what the contemporary companions could be like,
Yeah.
And no, I won't consider her to be as I've dubbed them, the horsewoman. She won't be one of those four, but she's definitely a top, I would say, top 15 companion across all of them,
For me, of the female companions we've seen up to now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have Susan, Barbara, Vicky, Dodo, Polly.
Yeah.
Excluding Katerina and Sarah Kingdom for the moment, right? Because they had one story. So leave them off. Polly's ranked number 2. For me. Yeah, at the moment. No. Of those 5, Polly is ranked number 2. And no offense to Vicky, there's a fairly sizable gap between Polly or Vicky / Susan, because sometimes they alternate. There's a very sizable gap for me between Polly and the next person on the list.
Yeah. No, but it's fair, because like I've talked before about how I really like Vicky as a companion, but her moments to shine, they're not really as standoutish as Polly's moments.
I was going to say, I think what makes Polly so great and what puts her, for me, in that number 2 spot of the companions that you and I have discussed up to now, obviously after the queen, that is Barbara,
Yeah.
the goddess that she is Polly and Barbara both did something far more regularly than the other female companions did.
Yeah.
Dodo being the worst extreme for this, which is that Polly has been known very well and very effectively to drive the plot.
Yeah.
She is very good at driving the plot. We saw it on the Moon Base. We saw it in the Highlanders. We saw it in
The Smugglers.
We saw it in pretty much all of her stories.
We saw it in 10 Planets. We saw it in War Machines. We saw, like, I think with the Underwater Menace and Power of the Daleks are probably the only 2 stories where there's no real drive on her behalf to the plot.
Yeah. And this is another one, because if you take out, my thing with a character is, if you took them out entirely, what did they contribute? Now, we've said that not every character has to contribute in every episode. This is true. We discussed this last week with Jamie. But when you reduce the character to just the screamer,
yeah,
and the screaming doesn't drive the plot, you have a problem. Because if you take it, so Polly's major screaming moment is obviously with the Macra, though she screams and gives out and help me for the rest of the story. But if you take out the big central piece, which is with the Macra, it doesn't change the plot, because Ben denied that it ever happened, so it doesn't change anything.
No. And it's a case of, like, oh, girl who cried wolf, and that's kind of left as it is, and it's a shame, because, like, it just feels like that when it comes to the female companions, ever since Barbara, we've been on an actual, up, down, up, down, up, down in terms of their performance, which is a shame, because we had such amazing consistency from Barbara throughout. I miss that. I miss that in a female companion,
And I thought we had that with Polly.
We
discussed it. It was such a relief to have Polly. And even in Power, like, she didn't have any plot driving moments in Power, but she wasn't bad.
No, because, like, we as we said at Power, we're discussing loads of other stories except this one. As we said in Power, her purpose and Ben's purpose were to establish Patrick Troughton as the new version of the Doctor, and she does that very well. Yeah. So I would say, probably until the Moon Base, we had consistency of good performances from Polly.
Until the Underwater Menace, you mean?
Sorry, yeah, Underwater Menace, because we had War Machines, Smugglers, 10 Planet, Power, and Highlanders.
Yeah. All great stories. She did great in all of them. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes you need a story sometimes you need screams in a story. We're not opposed to having screams in a story.
No,
for anyone who thinks that we're opposed to the very human reaction of screaming your head off when you encounter a 15-foot crab thing, we're not, by any stretch of the imagination. But it helps when that's counterbalanced with at least one strong non-screaming moment.
As I made the comparison when Darren spooked the shit out of me, I went, fuck, and I just kicked at him. So it was sort of a screaming moment, but I got my revenge. Yeah. And he'll never listen to this, so he can't deny it. So how about we move on to the last of the trio?
Yeah, so we have Jamie. What did you think of Jamie?
So, because of this story, I think we mentioned it, for me, Jamie is slowly becoming the companion in this grouping. Yeah. Kind of very similar in the way that Vicky was kind of taking up that mantle in her, affecting some of the Doctor's mannerisms and having that sort of relationship with him. Here we have Jamie, like, again, that scene that's removed in the pampering room. It bugs me because it's actually a really good scene for Jamie. It's really good for Fraser Hines as well, because he acts very boyish and stuff. And but here it's like he actually does kind of take on some of the Doctor's mannerisms, like, like trying to dance his way out of trouble, and because just like the whole kind of distraction, using distractions and stuff like that to get the keys and escape, and like he shows that without Ben around, he's more than capable of taking up the slack of the action man role, despite the. Would you consider his timeline origin to be a handicap for him in futuristic settings?
No. And this story in particular highlights why that's not a problem.
But that's what I mean, is in the sense of like you could potentially have the notion that it would be a handicap, but this story disproves that. But
it's no more a handicap to him than it is to Ben.
Yeah. I would say Ben probably has a bit more of an advantage due to the gap in technology because we mentioned it before about the differences of how Katarina would have handled something versus Jamie would handle something.
Yeah, but that's only really represented in the fact that the show was made in the 60s, so all of the technology, even the futuristic stuff, was built in the 60s.
Yeah, true, I suppose. Yeah. But no, I'm loving Ben. I'm sorry, but I'm loving Ben. But I'm loving Jamie more and more as the show goes on. And like again, Fraser Hines is cementing the legacy of the character of Jamie. And here we also have a test of the McCrimmon effect, where it's like, how powerful are these 15 fucking foot crabs? It's like, oh, fair enough. They nearly tore a Highlander in half. But I like it as well. The whole thing about not giving into the subliminal messaging and actually being also very kind of wise in the sense of like trying to convince the Doctor that no, you would actually be more beneficial up here because you have a better understanding of this stuff rather than me and Polly.
Yeah. For me, I think, so the stories that we've had up until now with Jamie, so we've had the Highlanders were, for a lot of it, who was kind of a secondary, tertiary character. He wasn't a character of focus in that story, unlike with Ben and Polly in the War Machines. There's a very big difference between the roles that they played in their first stories. Then we had the Underwater Menace, where he fit in very well with Ben, but he really was a duo in that.
Yeah.
Then we have the Moon Base, where he was unconscious for 2 episodes and then really didn't do a whole lot for the other 2. And now we have this. So for me, this is really Jamie's coming into his own story. Yeah. And I like the fact that it's a futuristic story as well. It's not contemporary, or historical, it's futuristic, because while it's not the strongest performance ever, it is a really good performance, and we get to see him in a futurized setting, thinking for himself and being himself. And that's the thing that I like about Jamie, is Jamie doesn't hide from the fact that he is from the 18th century. He doesn't hide from that. So when he hears weird fucking voices in his room, it wakes him the fuck up.
Yeah.
Because what the shit is that?
The spirits are after me, or some other Highland folktale.
Everything he takes what he knows from folktales and from his period in history, he applies what he can, and then it means he takes nothing at face value. Do you know? Like, you have Ben saying, oh, it's fine, whatever, go back to sleep, and he's like, no, there was a creepy fucking voice. What the shit was that? And he won't let it go, and because of that, he was able to resist the mind control.
Yeah.
Whereas Ben wasn't. And the other thing that I really like is how defensive he is of the Doctor and Polly.
Yeah.
Very similar to Ian, I imagine. If Ian were in that situation, we imagine that his reaction would be quite the same, where he's like, you can't send an old man and a girl into a mine. Are you fucking shitting me? His idea of, I'll go, no problem. Those 2 fucking stay here. And yeah, he eventually explains to the Doctor that he'd be of more use or whatever, but his initial thing was, are you fucking taking the piss sending an old man and a woman? Now, some could call that sexist, whatever. It's just part of who he is. It's where he's from, right?
Yeah.
Sending an old man and a woman into a mine. And just his reaction is just like, no.
But I won't even say it's sexist. It's more so kind of a savior mentality, in the sense of no one wants their friends to suffer while they can bear the brunt of the suffering themselves. I
think it's also, bearing in mind the time, it's just chivalry.
Yeah.
He's a very chivalrous person.
Yeah.
And that's his nature. I think, as well, his protectiveness of Polly is very cute. He's always, in this story a lot, there's a lot of keep your eye open, Polly, I'm not quite sure, and I'll take care of you, Polly, and I'll protect you, or whatever. And it comes across in a very brotherly way.
Yeah.
Like, you don't ever get the sense, because Ben and Polly have been established as Ben and Polly, a duo, potentially romantically, from their first story. Right? That was their interaction. And you don't ever get the sense that Jamie is trying to woo Polly. I don't think he'd say no if she offered.
Yeah, I think he's got a small bit of a crush, but because the fucking thing is skipped, we know that he's not the type to pursue it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think his defensiveness and protective nature of her comes across as very brotherly.
Yeah.
Do you know? The sort of the way I think of it is, now I'm not equating Ben to Ron Weasley because that's not fair on Ben. But if you imagine the trio of Harry, Ron, and Hermione,
yeah,
in the later books and the later movies, Harry and Hermione are very defensive of each other in a sort of sibling protective way. And I think Jamie is very similar in that. Again, in both cases, I think if the girl offered, they'd both say yeah, but, you know.
So, we've now done Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar, Stargate, we've got all the stars of the way. Now, Harry Potter has entered into the comparative equation.
There'll be another one in a minute. I'm just saying that right now. There's another one coming up.
Cool. Alright. Any more thoughts on Jamie?
No, overall, I think fantastic story. Fantastic story.
Fantastic showing from young McCrimmon.
Yeah, and hey, he got to get a Highland reel in there, so you know.
Absolutely.
Or Highland jig. I can't remember what the difference is between a jig and a reel.
No, I think it was a reel that he was doing, but then again, we don't actually see it because unfortunately, it would cost too much to animate. So
he does a little bit of jumping.
Morris dancing.
So moving on to our story-based companions. So we have two, one of whom. Actually, both of whom go through a sort of against you, with you type.
Yeah.
So the first is Medoc.
I think it's a shame that he had to die off screen.
I agree. My first notes for him are just poor bastard.
Yeah. Because he's an incredibly strong character.
And clearly, he's clearly well liked in the colony.
He's not oh, there goes fucking tinfoil Medoc again type shit, you know?
Yeah, people, obviously there's very Stepford brain control thing about the colony, but, no one ever says, Medoc was always like this. Like, you even have the moment where he's being brought through the crowd and someone in the crowd says, no, I worked with him. Let me try and speak to him. And that says a lot about him. And I would have loved to seen him survive and become part of the leadership of the colony with Pilot.
I think I have that in my notes, so please again stay out of my notes because otherwise it just looks like we're mimicking each other. But
one word for you, Betty.
What?
Ditto.
Fuck it. It worked then, it works now. And if you don't like it, fuck yeah. I really know. Again, he's a great character here because he's not a loony. Like he's not like that outsider character. He's clearly someone that I would be very curious to know what his position in the colony was prior to the start of the story.
Yeah.
Well, because clearly he's. I don't think being made the leader of the Danger Gang is like a job that they give to someone that they just want to kill. So I was very interested in that. When it comes to the killing him off screen, I think it actually serves no purpose because the way that it's done in the animation, I'm not sure what it's done. There's no indication as to how it's done in the actual reconstructions, but it's like that thing of where he looks behind him and all of a sudden the camera, which is meant to represent the Macra, lunges at him. It serves no purpose because we already know what the Macra look like.
Yeah.
If they had remained hidden until now, then they'd be like, ooh, this is kind of terrifying. But it's like, no, we know exactly what they are, so there's no spook factor here.
I think the only purpose it serves, and I mean, it being off screen, you can't have too much gruesome stuff on what is fundamentally a kids program.
On Australian television.
Or on Australian TV. I think what it was meant to prove is that the Macra can kill, and that they will kill. That's probably the purpose it served in the story, but I think from just the way they approach things, that was kind of implied already.
Yeah, like I just thought, like, not what maybe it's a question. How do they kill? Do they turn them into ooze? Do they snap them in half? Do they gobble them up and then turn them into ooze? Who knows?
Do they just crush them like with their big claw, and he just becomes a pile of ooze?
Absolutely, nutcracker.
Also, he became green ooze.
Yeah, I don't know. Something very. I'm just trying to think, like there's some show where like people just turn into orange blobs and they just puddle out, like when they get. I can't remember what it is, but one thing that I thought was interesting is the fact that he seems to resist the brainwashing of the correction facility, with no detrimental effects to his sanity.
Slight paranoia.
Well,
smidgen.
I would say that the paranoia
understandable. But smidgen.
Yeah, but I would say that the paranoia comes more so from the fact that, like, there seems to be this blatant, complete, like, ostrich, like, head in the sand mentality towards the concept of the Macra. Anyone would be fucking paranoid over that.
Yeah, I think what really stood out for me with Medoc is he could have very easily, I think, played along. He could have gone through the correction facility and played at being happy.
Yeah.
And he chose not to, knowing where they would put him. And even with where he was put, he still gives 100%. There's a gas leak and he's immediately on it. I think that really speaks to how strong he is as a person.
Yeah, he's for the colony. Probably more so than... I think the only person that probably rivals his for the colony-ness is Pilot, who doesn't have a name. He's just Pilot. As Pilot is his name.
Yeah. Like Officia.
Yep. What's your name? Richard. One thing about the House of Correction thing, because they couldn't break Medoc, I'm just imagining like the Monty Python Spanish Inquisition. The comfy chair and the pillows we used at the fluffy end, all this type of stuff. Do you want to go on to Pilot next?
Yeah, so not my favourite Pilot, because he doesn't have a connection with the living ship called Moya.
No.
That was the other reference.
Ah, cool. So we have now brought in Farscape. Excellent. Which I'll actually be starting soon, because I finished one show that I was watching, so I'm now going to go to another show.
Farscape is great.
There's a guy from the 5 or 6 episodes I watched of Farscape years ago. It feels like an RPG.
Yeah, it's an RPG with Muppets in space. And
there's also an Australian link because it's done by an Australian company in cohesion with Jim Henson. Pilot. I like Pilot because, unlike some other characters that we have viewed as villains by association, or heroes that start off as villains by association, I didn't actually ever view him as a villain here.
I think Pilot is a villain by circumstance, just based purely on his role as pilot. Do you know? So approving of them going to the work gang, approving of whatever. But it's purely just because of his position. Yeah. Do you know? Like, there's no pleasure derived from it. So I think Pilot is probably the definition of villain by circumstance. And it's not even just because of his position in the colony. It's because he's being mind controlled.
Yeah, exactly. Also, the colony clearly isn't the fucking ship. Why is he called Pilot? It doesn't move. It's a stationary building.
I wonder, because like Pilot is his title. They don't call him anything else. Pilot is his title. He is. They
don't even refer to him as the. They just call him Pilot, or send him to Pilot. Like...
Well, yeah, but then later on Ben says that they want the Doctor to become Pilot.
Yeah.
They obviously don't mean to become the man himself, so clearly it's a position.
Yeah, I know.
And he just doesn't have a relationship with anyone to call him by his first name.
Yeah.
But I think what makes him an interesting character is, like I said, he's very much for the colony.
Yeah.
And he is within their current mentally fuckery structure.
Mm-hmm.
He is a very good leader for the colony.
Yeah.
I do question how effective he will be on his own without a big voice from the sky telling him what to do, or a big face from a screen. But I think we see enough of him after he finds out about the Macra that he'd probably pick it up really quickly.
One thing that I was going to say, I think he would have been effective, but one thing that's, again, I suppose really isn't answered at any stage is the controller is based on a real person, who we then see is like later disheveled and aged, possibly because of like the trauma that he's gone through. But like, what is Pilot the second in command of the thing as such, or is controller, or is the controller someone that's made up by the Macra and is just gaslighted? They literally gaslight people into the story.
Very literally.
Yeah.
I always took it that controller was the predominant leader, because if the people want the Doctor to be Pilot, what's Pilot going to do? Clearly they want him to move up to be the ultimate leader of the colony, because otherwise that's a fucking dick move. The guy is standing right there. You can't just say you want to huff him out of his job and give it to somebody else. Like, what the fuck? Yeah, so I think the controller was a real person. I think it was a real position in the colony. And I think it's only after the Macra became involved that position became a remote position. And communication was done purely through the screen.
Cool.
That's my read of it anyway.
Right. Maybe the novelization would reveal more secrets.
Maybe, yeah.
Another one for the list. So, we're on to the villains now. So, do we want to do like the human based and then move on to the Macra, or do we want to do the Macra? Okay. So, we have Officia and Ola. With Officia, I don't see him as, like, I think he's a villain of circumstance.
Villain.
Hey, you said it before, I didn't comment on it, so he's a bad guy. Okay, he's a bad guy by circumstance, but I get the impression that he's also like Lesterson he's the type of scientist that doesn't really care about the consequences of some of his actions.
I didn't get that, I'll be honest. So,
well, maybe I think it was just the sort of the gleeful nature I picked up on him in the way that he interacts with like the Doctor and a few of the others.
Yeah, so my thing with him is, because originally I was a little bit, again, we've discussed it before, I was a little bit confused as to why you included him as a character for discussion. Because I think, like Pilot and Ola, who we'll get to in a minute, he is very much a villain by circumstance in that he is brainwashed. He is brainwashed and he is being told what to do by control. But he walks the very fine line between those two other characters, where Pilot wanted what's best for the colony. Ola will talk about in a minute. I have a funny feeling you got a similar read on him that I was. That he's like the other end of that extreme.
Yeah.
I think Officia just followed whatever the controller said without a personal stake in it. I don't think we see enough of him personally, and maybe you saw differently, but I didn't see enough of him to get a sense on who he would be without the controller talking him through. Because like when the controller is like, pump all of this gas into the old mine, there's no questioning it whatsoever. It's just the controller said, so I will do.
Yeah, like, see, I got a strange reading of him in the sense of like that because I've been watching a lot of the US Office at the moment, he kind of reminds me of the character of Dwight in the sense of like, while he isn't ostensibly a bad person, he doesn't, shrink at the possibility of fucking showing some bit of authority over people,
True, but again, with Officia, the way he's presented to me, how much of that is his brainwashing? How much of that is you are to control this aspect? The people in the pit don't matter. The people in the pit are expendable. The people in the pit, because you don't know how much of that was bred into him, like as in forced into him. And I personally, because we don't really see, I don't see any glee from him, one way or the other.
Do you know what would kind of help form my opinion on this?
The actual actor's reaction?
No, if we had a scene of where Pilot weighs in on the worth of the people in the mine.
Yeah.
Because I'm judging this now completely off Ola and Officia's viewpoint of anyone that's been sentenced to the mine. Whereas with Pilot, we never see that. And I think had he had that moment, that would probably give a definitive read into Officia's stance, whether he is a villain or whether he's a character of no consequence or whether he's could go into the potential. Well, no, I wouldn't consider him to be a companion in this. No. So whether he would be a villain or a character of no consequence.
So my read was that he's a character of no consequence. But I can understand how you got villain in there as well.
Yeah. I think, like, again, with the missing stories, there's a whole lot to unpack and there's a whole lot to discuss that we could like be here for fucking hours. Which I think we're coming up to that time anyway. But I think what we can definitely agree on is the next person is Ola.
Yeah, so Ola, all of the humans in power are villains by circumstance. It's just because of the brainwashing, it's a given. Ola, for me, was the only one, and I do wonder if part of this is how they drew him.
Yeah.
They did draw him very sort of Genghis Khan from Mulan with the pointy teeth.
Not Genghis
Khan. What the fuck is his name?
Xiaoyun.
Xiaoyun, that's the one. Why did I think Genghis Khan? Oh, whatever.
Because it's China and invasions, and it's not quite Mongols but Huns and so on.
Yeah. So, but they drew him with the pointy teeth, and
I think that character actually has that disparity. I think where there's a gap in the teeth.
Not the gap, but his actual they emphasized his canines a bit.
Oh, okay. I didn't actually notice that. I just thought he looked way too kind of Dick Dastardly the whole time.
Yeah, but you kind of get the sense that Ola would be the same even without the brainwashing.
I think if he actually saw what the Macra looked like, he'd actually still work with them, so long as he was given the role of administrative figurehead. Yeah,
I agree. I think he's a bit of a dick.
Yeah, he's like I get the impression he'd be like your man Ellis from Die Hard, which is like, okay, you're a terrorist, I'll work with you. What's this? You want to shoot me in the head? Oh dear.
Like the reason why I say that is again, we don't know what level of brainwashing he has had. So he's exposed to the most people talking about the Macra.
Yeah.
And he denies it all. No. We don't know how much brainwashing he has undergone to be able to set all that aside time and again and again and again, right? But when he gets promoted to being in charge, he's fucking loving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is not brainwashed.
I don't think just him. I don't think there's any love lost between himself and Pilot. Well, definitely not between him and Pilot. Maybe Pilot might feel a bit sad that, someone he thought of as a work colleague he's out to fuck him over. One thing I want to ask though, given the kind of gaiety and jovial nature of the colony with their jingly music and their marching bands and all this type of stuff, did you think that the necessity for such a militant security force seems a small bit kind of contrary to the whole ethos of the colony? Or again, is that just the influence of the Macra?
I think it's the influence of the Macra. Do you know that? So this story reminded me of a few things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get to most of them in my overall. But one thing that it reminded me of in terms of this happy gay, in terms of happy colony experience, right?
Yeah.
Is Justice from Star Trek Next Generation. Where you have this perfect colony where everyone runs and frolics and hugs, and you get the sense there's lots of sex.
You don't get the sense. It's more or less just here are my clothes. Take them off, please.
Yeah. But if you break a rule, you die.
Yeah. Don't tread on the flower beds.
Don't tread on the flower beds, Wesley. And it's this thing of, in order to maintain such a happy and forced happy environment, you have to remove all opposition to that.
All undesirable elements of society.
Yeah. And to do that, particularly with the Macra in the background overseeing things, you need a strong task force.
Yeah.
You need a strong deterrent, basically.
Yeah. And also, because I've been watching a lot of tabletop recently, and Will Wheaton admits that he is shite at football, I think they wrote the episode around Will Wheaton falling into a flower bed while playing sports.
I was going to say, he says that he's bad at football. They were playing baseball.
Sports, in general. Go local sports team. So now, the Macra.
The giant crabs.
Watching this, every time they appeared on screen, all I had in my head was crab people look like crabs and they talk like people from South Park. That's all I fucking had. I think the animation did a lot more for them than the actual production of the story would have done.
I very much agree.
Because otherwise, it's a kind of a B-movie concept of a giant insect not crustacean. Yeah, I was going to say amphibian, but they're not crustacean. Haha. That's what watching The Little Mermaid on fucking repeat gets you. So I think how we watched it back then, or had we actually seen the existing thing, they probably would have fallen into that category. Whereas with the updated animation, they're a lot more imposing. They're more like kind of Starship Trooper-esque level of creepy villain.
Yeah, so the thing for me, right, is, oh my god, the giant crabs. The script doesn't really match the visuals in some respects.
No.
We discussed how they're described as insect-like. People describe it they're like a giant bacteria. And you're like, no. No. My question is, they clearly need this gas to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It presumably forms part of their atmosphere that they need to survive. Do they need to control the humans in order to have access to it? Like, they're clearly highly intelligent and they have the ability to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of hoping that someone
I don't think it's necessary. Sorry,
Go on.
I don't think it's necessarily the ability to speak, but I think they have probably a low-key telepathic field that they use machines to amplify.
Well, communicate then.
Oh yeah, communicate. Yeah, and I'm very sorry for cutting across you.
They have the ability to communicate. And is it wrong of me that I really wanted someone to propose a non-violent solution to the problem? Like, the feeling I got was that the Macra were here first.
Yeah.
And the humans came along, changed the atmosphere to make it habitable for them. The Macra went underground. And then needed to go deeper and deeper, and so had to get the humans to help them to mine deeper and deeper to get the gas. So I kind of wanted someone to sort of treat the Macra as sentient beings, as opposed to, because they're just treated like an infestation at the end.
Do you know what this is kind of having a small kind of shades of? Our discussion about the Ark with the monoids. In terms of like how they were taken advantage of, and then it was like you reap what you sow kind of thing. But here it's the thing where like the human intrusion isn't aware of the Macra. And I think it would have been I think it would have been an interesting concept had, the Doctor called for, look, clearly there's some sort of symbiotic relationship going here, as opposed to parasitic, maybe symbiotic. But I think, again, because of how strong the brainwashing aspect was of the Macra side of things, and when the head Macra is speaking as the leader, how hysterical he gets in order to maintain the subterfuge. It could be very well potential of where like the offer to sign some sort of a treaty or agreement would have been shot down by the Macra.
But it's also entirely possible that like the reason why the Macra are so hidden is because when the humans first discovered them, they did try to wipe them out.
Yeah.
We don't know. I don't think we get enough of where they came from. To be honest, what part of me wanted them to be like was flashback now for anyone listening to the original My Little Pony cartoon series. There was an episode which I loved as a kid. This particular, I think it came on a video that me and Niamh had. There was an episode where these crabs go through the valley and destroy everything. And everyone's like, oh my god, the crabs are evil. And they lock the crabs away in a tomb. And you find out later that the crabs were actually the good guys. And they were trying to catch some renegade plants. It's My Little Pony, right? But the whole idea was that don't judging things by appearances. That was the whole point of the story, right? Was don't judge things by appearances. I think that's what I kind of wanted it to be. Don't judge things by appearances. The Macra were being exterminated. They found a way to control the humans, so they gave the humans a perfect life. Happy, everyone has a purpose, everyone has joy, and they get the gas that they need. And so I thought that would have been an interesting way of doing it.
No, like I think I would watch that story. All right, like I'm not going to discount the notion that there's potential, like they're not like 100% evil or anything like that. I think I won't say it would have made for a more interesting story, but it definitely would have made for like potentially like maybe that concept of what you're saying there could be transported to a different story that doesn't involve like say 15-foot crabs, but a much more like a different species or something like that.
Yeah, I think it would make for a more complex story.
Yeah, there we go. No, I actually didn't think about that, to be honest with you, because again I just had like the whole fucking crab people stuck in my head. And
yeah, like, it's a thing where like these beings clearly have sentience, and they have an ability to communicate, and that ability is not leveraged by our heroes at all. And they describe them as a parasite, and as essentially a bacteria that needs to be removed.
Yeah, because like I suppose if you think about it, going way back now, the Web Planet, the Doctor knew that the Animus was the villain, not the Zarbi themselves. So, interesting. Again, we reach a very interesting viewpoint when we come to discuss this story.
But yeah, they're giant crabs.
Yeah. So, a character discussion that offered a lot more than I think both of us thought.
Yeah. We originally wanted these to be an hour long.
Yeah.
We were naive. We were so naive.
Well, like, look, it's us. We could fucking talk for Ireland.
And we do.
Yeah. We do. How many times did we, like, so myself and Trish used to play in a role-playing group. Again, to further along the running time of this, we used to play in a role-playing group. And the group would run for hours. And then we would walk back to our apartment, which was roughly about, I'm going to say, 5 miles away? Yeah. And we'd talk, discussing stuff about, like, be it either the game or just nerd stuff in general. So we walk these 5 miles. And then we'd probably talk another hour or two afterwards. So yeah, we have a tendency to ramble on. But back to this anyway. So we now come to the overall. And do you want to go first, or will I go first?
I'll go first.
Cool.
Overall, I think the idea for this story was good.
Yeah.
It had some interesting ideas with Ben being brainwashed. That was done a lot better than it was in War Machines.
Mm-hmm.
And him turning against everyone else. The controller character was very Equilibrium or V for Vendetta.
He's very Big Brother. He's very 1984 type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, the whole story reminded me very much of Equilibrium.
Yeah.
Which is a really good film if you haven't seen it.
And it's got a Doctor Who connection.
Mm-hmm. And this idea of everyone, and obviously in that story, it's you're not allowed to have emotion. You're not meant to have emotion, but it's very much this. Everyone has to meet this standard, and you have this father voice telling you what to do. Again, very Big Brother. And the whole idea of the mind control in the colony, I thought all of that was very interesting. However, for some reason, I didn't get as into it as I would have thought I would. Because, I love V for Vendetta. I love Equilibrium. I thought the idea of Ben being brainwashed was fantastic. Jamie is his strongest he has been up to now. And yet, the story itself didn't really pull me in. I think at several points, I thought it was rushed. And I jumped from one idea to the next without very much connectivity. And that may have been an animation choice. I don't quite know.
I don't think so. I think it's actually the nature of the production. I think it was the nature of the because how many other stories have we read? So as long-term listeners will know, when I'm doing the reviews, I try and make it a bit more cohesive and trying to eliminate some of the jump cuts because sometimes they're just literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas here, I think it's a case of it's actually the way that it was originally presented.
Yeah, so that might just be me though.
Okay.
And my preference. So for me, the concept is good. If you're watching it now, you're going to be watching the animated version, which obviously you get to see the Macra in a better way.
Yeah.
And you do have access to some of those missing things if you want to watch the reconstructed parts or whatever. But it didn't keep me engaged. And Polly, this was a bad show by Polly. So for me, it was a 3. I think the concept alone kept it high. I was considering would I give it half marks, and I was like no, because the concept was good, and maybe it's just my personal preference that I couldn't get into it. So for me, it's a 3.
Cool. All right, my score is partially based on this premise. The Doctor takes on a crab infestation. I think I got into about episode 2 when I made this realization, and I fucking pissed myself laughing for about 15 minutes. I just I was like, that's what it is. It's just the Doctor takes on a giant crab infestation. I like the concept of I agree. Okay, the concept of the Macra, the big crabs or whatever the case is. I like big monsters, but this is a small bit silly in this regards. Had they been a bit more in terms of maybe in the web plant size things, where they had been a more comparable size, then, or even smaller, whatever the case, you could literally have head crabs from Half-Life. It probably would have been a bit more engaging in that regards. Again, I agree with you. The concept is great. The concept of a native life manipulating a colony to suit its own needs, and there's the whole mind, the brainwashing, mind fuckery, companions affected, all that. It's great. Michael Craze's performance in this, great, fantastic. As we said, probably one of his strongest performances as Ben. I lose the points for just the nature of the Macra, as I said. and also Polly's handling in this story. Not a huge fan of it. Don't really like it at all. In fact, I just think it fucking sucks. So I decided to, but again, like there's the solid performances by Jamie McCrimmon, the three lads, by Patrick Troughton, Fraser Hines, and Michael Craze. A genuinely cool character in the form of Medoc in the pilot. I like them. Gertan Klauber as Ola, I think is great. He's so menacing. He's again that type of character that whenever he's on screen, there's going to be some fucking wrench thrown into the plan. So that was great. So I decided, look, I'm just going to split it right down the middle. I'm going to give this a 2.5. And I would definitely recommend to people that having the animation is great because it helps for people that are finding it difficult to get through the missing stories. Animation, visual movement, it does help. But I would definitely recommend listening to the reconstructions at some point or watching the reconstructions because you get to see Michael Craze's facial performances with the snapshots into some of those scenes, but you also get to see those two missing scenes, which I think add a lot to this.
Yeah.
And again, that didn't impact my score. It's just a offshoot recommendation.
Yeah, I would agree to that recommendation. I think this is one of the... I need to check my notes. I think one of the rare times where...
You scored higher than I have?
Yeah. It doesn't always happen. It happened in 10th Planet as well, actually.
It did. You gave it, like, what,
4.5.
4.5, and I gave it 4. And I think that might have been something else. Probably way back in the early days, before the Empire. You're looking at the scores now, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure it out.
This was one of those times I was meaner than you were.
Yeah, but like it's incredibly rare that
I think the gunfighters
you score lower than me.
I think the gunfighters I was like fucking flat close to a 0.
Yeah, gunfighters you were 0.5.
Yeah.
But usually I'm the hypercritical bitch. I don't mean to be. It's just who I am.
Macra Terror lovers, send your angry letters to Paddy this time. So that is the end of the Macra Terror for now.
It is indeed. So join us next week when we'll be discussing the faceless ones.
I wonder what they're going to look like.
I was going to say one thing about this season: they're doing fairly well on their titles.
Yeah,
their titles are very intriguing.
Absolutely, like I think everything has been like fairly. I think with the exception of the Highlanders, everything has been very kind of like Guardians of the Power of the Daleks. But what does the Power of the Daleks actually mean? Is it literally, here's their plug-in source? They take AA batteries. They fight for the benefits of chicken penne arrabbiata. That is a running joke of this season. That fucking calls for fighting.
Anyway, we will speak to you next week.
Bye for now, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.